Hey guys, Edre here, and I'm going to be doing a classic album review. I know I've been slacking, I'm sorry, I've had a busy past week or two, and I'm going to get back in the swing of it with a few videos today. But Face to Face, Ignorance is Bliss, the 1999 album from one of the most overlooked punk bands. Why am I doing this review? Why am I doing this review in particular for my classic review? Number one, I'm doing it for quite a few reasons. Face to Face really kicked off in the early 90s, and with albums like Don't Turn Away, Big Choice, and their self-titled Face to Face album, they were one of the most important and influential skate punk bands of the early and mid 90s. And on the latter album, their self-titled one that I mentioned, they began to sort of incorporate other sounds into it, especially on songs like Complicated and I Won't Back Down. But despite all this, their sound had remained pretty consistent. But on their 1999 fourth studio album, Ignorance is Bliss, they took a big lunge forward into new territory. Well, they obviously stuck to that punk and rock roots. They incorporated elements of emo, of alternative rock, of indie. They incorporated all that into their sound, as well as post-grunge and grunge into their sound, while keeping that skate punk and pop punk sound. So this album is a lot like a melting pot. And the reason why I'm doing this review and why I think this album is as important as it is because a lot of punk bands have tried to change their sound by incorporating other styles of punk or just other music altogether, and have done it and executed it very poorly. Some examples include Green Day's newest albums, and there's that one Clash album. I'm blanking on it. Cut the Crap. Cut the Crap is another one where they definitely did that as well, but it just wasn't well executed. It wasn't well received by the people, and it just wasn't. It was low quality, but diverse. So this is proof that diversity doesn't always mean good. But in the case of Face to Face, this bold step forward actually turned out really good for them. Afterwards, I feel like a lot of their music was reactionary pop punk in the 2000s and even up to date. So they didn't keep on this trend that they started with Ignorance is Bliss. But it's this one album that, to me, is the crowning jewel on their discography. Lyrically, this album is a pretty big improvement. They definitely took a stance on some social issues, as well as looking at more inward, internal viewpoint. The new drummer, Pete Parada, they had on this album actually brought it to the table on this thing. It is a huge reason why I love this album. The drumming is so tight, and people today may know him more for his work with The Offspring. But him adding the drums definitely pushed them forward a good amount. The track list is a very solid track list. For one of the main songs that sticks out early in the album for me is the song In Harm's Way. There's a part in the middle, it's sort of like a bridge, but it's not really, where they kind of have a bit more of a melodic guitar section, and the song kind of does give me Foo Fighter type vibes, but I think this is better executed than anything Foo Fighters have ever done. And the song Burden, and one of my favorite ones later on in the album is the song Lost, which is a much more toned down song. And you still have the really fast, punchy punk songs like I Know What You Are, which is definitely, I think, one of the highlights on this album. It's just right in your face. The production is phenomenal here, and it's that fine line, rock albums and punk albums, especially punk. There's a fine line between being produced very poorly and being overproduced. And this is riding that line kind of right in the middle. And it's produced well because it still captures that energy of them without being completely compressed to the point of no return. I still feel passion in these songs. Another big standout to me is the vocals. The singer in Face to Face has always kind of had these styles of vocals. This is nothing new, per se, But he does incorporate some more elements of that kind of grungy sound, but it doesn't sound as forced as, say, Nickelback or, Creed. It sounds genuine. And that's what I like about it. It's not such a horrible fake twang that takes away from the album. This is how he sung. Listen to the previous 3 albums. He had sung like this before, but now with a new sound, he adapted the way he was singing. And in the end, I feel like this album to me is kind of foreshadowing what was to come in the punk scene and in the music scene in the future. You see, the 90s, or at least up the early and mid-90s, I would argue is my personal favorite era for punk music, especially the skate punk. That was like not quite pop punk, but not quite hardcore. It was like that perfect middle ground. That's what I liked a lot about early Face to Face. That's what I like a lot about early Green Day, The Offspring, Rancid, Screeching Weasel, so many other bands. But, the 2000s, on the other hand, were pretty much dominated by this whole emo and pop-punk wave that came in that sort of dominated, with bands like My Chemical Romance and, Taking Back Sunday dominating the more emo-punk side, while Blink-182 and Jimmy Eat World were dominating the very, very, very pop-punk side of it. And this is right on the cusp of that. And compared to a lot of the other punk albums that came out in 1999, this one really does stand high for me, and it is very disappointing the way it's overlooked, especially even by the band, which overlooks it quite a bit, and they don't even really play any of these songs live anymore. And in the end, I think that this album is strong front to back. Its musical diversity is executed perfectly. The drumming and the vocals are definitely better on this album than they had been on the past. Lyrically, the album is a pretty big improvement, and I definitely like the style and aesthetic of it, incorporating some of that more emotional side, which I hadn't really gotten much from them before. It definitely shows a more soft side, as well as a more tough and in-your-face side, such as songs like I Know What You Are. And in the end, I honestly, after a lot of thinking, have decided on giving it a very generous rating. A strong 8 to a light 9. Is that going to focus? Is that going to focus? Come on. There we go. Light 9. Why do I give it a light 9? Because this is an album that, I don't know. It's just, to me, one of the most perfect albums from the 90s. I think it's really overlooked. I think Face to Face as a band is very overlooked. I understand that after this point, into the 21st century, they hadn't been as successful or hadn't done as much. But they still took the bold move to make this ambitious album, and I just wish that they appreciated it more and that the people appreciated it more. This won't be the only video today. There will be more. That's it for all. Goodbye.